Video games can serve as an escape from the ordinary, the monotonous, the common everyday events that make life dull. New and different experiences let us escape, explore, and have fun. But while putting variety into your game is important, game designers need to be careful. Creating a range of experiences shouldn't turn the game as a whole into an underdeveloped, forgettable mess. There is a fine line between variety and aimlessness. Having each distinct experience reflect a cohesive whole is the goal. Do it right and you get WarioWare, Grand Theft Auto, or The Witcher 3. Do it wrong and you get Carnival games for the Wii. But no series underscores just how tricky it is to add gameplay variety quite as much as Sonic the Hedgehog. For over 2.5 decades, developer Sonic Team has tried over and over to add gameplay variety through different gameplay styles. With, well, mixed results. What is generally considered the core of a Sonic game? Going fast and momentum-based platforming. To let the player go fast, level designers need to make very large levels which are also challenging and interesting for the player to blaze their way through. For developers, this can be a design nightmare as it requires a huge amount of development resources for a relatively short amount of gameplay in a single stage. Because of how expensive it can be to make this kind of level, a full Sonic-focused game is by design pretty short. This is partly why many Sonic games feature multiple playable characters that go through the same or at least similar stages with different styles of gameplay as a means to lengthen the game and add variety. The earliest and perhaps smartest use of multiple characters in the Sonic series can be found in Sonic 3 and its companion game Sonic & Knuckles. Sonic 3 and Knuckles presents the player with 3 different characters. Sonic, who provides the standard fast platforming that fans expect, Tails, who adds the ability to fly and swim to bypass some of the platforming challenges, and Knuckles, who trades some speed and jumping for the ability to glide and climb walls. What's great about the characters in Sonic 3 is that they let the player approach the same levels in new ways while still staying true to the core of a Sonic game. Tails and Knuckles don't play drastically different from Sonic, they work under the same general rules and have the same goals, the end of a stage. They just have a few advantages that provide for a slightly different experience, adding in replay value and variety while still keeping the speed and momentum that makes a Sonic game feel like a Sonic game. The Sonic Advanced and Sonic Rush series both use the same idea with different characters, and for the most part it works. While multiple characters were a solid way to bring variety and replayability for 2D Sonic games, how does this work in Sonic's jump to 3D? The original Sonic Adventure, released in 1999 for the Sega Dreamcast, featured 6 different playable characters, each with their own story and unique style of gameplay. These characters included Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, E102 Gamma, and Big the Cat. Sonic's gameplay consists of the fast platforming that players expect. Tails is similar, except that he has to race either Sonic or Eggman and retains his ability to fly. Knuckles changes the game up entirely with a treasure hunt for emerald shards in large open sandbox stages. Amy's story focuses on slower platforming while running from a giant robot. E102 Gamma is based around shooting. And Big the Cat's gameplay is all about putting a fishhook through his best friend's face. As the years went on, the most divisive aspect of Sonic Adventure was these different characters and playstyles. Developer Yuji Naka was wrestling with creating such huge worlds for Sonic. In a 1998 interview, he said, "Because Sonic's very fast, you have to create a huge scale simulation. I've put huge efforts into creating a big map. Of course I have to focus on the details of the 3D world, but I have to create a vast scale map as well. This is the most difficult aspect of Sonic Adventure. If it were Mario or a slower character, I wouldn't have to create the huge world first for Sonic. But then thought, why not utilize these maps for other characters? Maybe I could add some variety to the game, not just running quickly through this huge world. That's one of the key concepts in the game." Now, using multiple characters in the same levels allows the developers to reuse art and design assets, which extends the game's length and adds in variety, but if it's not done carefully, it can dilute the focus of the core game. You can't expect the same level design to feel good for fast-paced platforming, extremely slow platforming, a treasure hunt, and a shooting gallery. Adding in a completely irrelevant fishing minigame with Bootleg Totoro doesn't solve the problem. Forcing the player to slog through every one of these playstyles to finish the game doesn't help either. This was a problem that Sonic 3 and Knuckles avoided because the characters were treated more like variations rather than completely different kinds of games. The stage design still felt intended for them. At times, the levels in Sonic Adventure can feel at odds with certain characters that the stages weren't originally intended for. Taking a level that works well for Sonic and forcing it to also accommodate for the shooting or treasure hunting stages can limit the design space for both gameplay styles. For example, the downtown section of Speed Highway is an area that feels designed for Knuckles, with a lot of verticality on top of having an open world sandbox design, similar to that of Mario 64, with a ton of little nooks and crannies to explore while hunting for emerald pieces. Now Sonic goes through the exact same area at the end of his version of Speed Highway, but because of the verticality and open nature of the stage, it feels like a strange and abrupt place to end a level as Sonic, who's at his best when he's running through long stretches of terrain. The same problem applies to E102 Gamma, where 80% of his stages are shared with Sonic. Because Gamma's moveset doesn't really work with the roller coaster level design of Sonic, the developers gave him the smaller, flatter sections of those stages instead of building his own from scratch, which doesn't really work. Gamma's gameplay is based around shooting enemies to keep a timer from hitting 0, but the thing is, his stages are too small for this to even work. They're based around a timer, but really you don't need to shoot any enemies to make it in time, which makes his gameplay feel kinda pointless. Only Gamma's final stage takes any real advantage of his gameplay style, and it's the only one that wasn't originally built for Sonic. This issue was partially fixed in Sonic Adventure 2, where the 6 playstyles are reduced to only 3 in the main game: running, shooting, and treasure hunting. Stages are no longer shared between characters beyond some similar themes and art assets, so levels are designed with the respective playstyles in mind. However, Sonic Adventure 2 still suffers from some serious pacing issues, amongst other problems. Emerald Radar. Sega continued to experiment with the series by using other characters and playstyles in Sonic Heroes, Sonic Unleashed, and the hilariously awful Sonic 06, all of which suffered similar problems. The additional characters and styles would become one of the focal points of criticism for Sonic from both fans and critics alike, so much so that the actual lack of them became a focal point for the marketing of Sonic 4. There was a general consensus that many people wanted more focus and polish put into Sonic's core gameplay, and aside from some of the handheld titles, it wouldn't be until 2010's Sonic Colors where Sega finally struck a balance between Sonic's high-speed gameplay, varied platforming, and exploration. Sonic Colors understands the core appeal of Sonic. It's not this, or whatever the hell this is. Sonic Colors keeps itself focused on this. Taking what was learned from the daytime half of Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors is about racing your way through the stage as Sonic and only Sonic. The game seamlessly shifts perspectives between 2D and 3D, and every level keeps the player on their toes by making them use Sonic's array of mobility-based moves with boosting, quick-stepping, drifting, homing attacking, and sliding. In addition to Sonic's large moveset, additional variety is created with the Wisps. Wisps are colorful creatures that serve as power-ups, granting Sonic special context-sensitive abilities that are built around the level design. There are a total of 8 Wisp powers, and they all share a common trait: movement. White fills up the player's boost gauge, Cyan turns Sonic into a laser that bounces off of walls, Yellow lets him drill underground and underwater, Green allows him to fly and dash through trails of rings to gain speed, Pink grants the ability to scale walls, Orange launches him up to great heights, Purple turns Sonic into a monster that chomps its way through enemies and obstacles, and lastly Blue lets him change special blue rings into platforms, and vice versa. Every Wisp power allows Sonic to move in ways that he simply couldn't before. They're rarely ever required to complete the game, and most importantly, they are easy to control and quick to use on the fly, with just a press of the button or a flick of the Wii remote. These powers add in a slight Metroidvania style of exploration to the game, as they open the way to alternative routes and levels. For example, in the first stage there are large sections of dirt designed for the Yellow Wisp, which is unavailable during the first playthrough. When the power is unlocked later on, the player can go back and explore these areas to see what they missed. These alternate routes often lead to one of the many hidden red rings, which unlocks bonus stages and eventually the ability to become supersonic. This gating and backtracking is nothing groundbreaking, but it's nice and adds some healthy replayability, variety, and depth to many of the stages. Sonic Colors sets up a solid foundation, and its follow-up Sonic Generations builds upon it with its healthy split of 2D Classic Sonic and 3D Modern Sonic. As a franchise, Sonic seemed like it was finally headed in the right direction. At least until it took another misstep, because Sonic Lost World takes the foundation that Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations had lovingly laid out, and completely trips over itself. Sonic Lost World goes too far with its variety. It loses coherency by rapidly switching between gameplay styles throughout every stage. Every level feels like it operates under its own rules. The 2D and 3D levels feel like they use different physics, and they never transition smoothly into each other. Here, it's a cylinder that kind of plays like Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations. Now it's a 2D stage based around verticality. Now it's an auto runner. Now it's a rail-based level straight out Donkey Kong Country. Now it's a Super Monkey Ball level where the player rolls around a snowball. Now it's based around stealth. Now it's ice skating. Now it's rolling around giant pieces of fruit. Now it's pinball. And on top of all of this, the wisps are also shoved in. Every power makes use of the Wii U's gamepad features, but they're unintuitive to use and end up completely breaking the game's flow. Even the powers that do return from Sonic Colors seem to function completely differently, and since only one type of power appears in each stage, the Metroidvania aspect from Sonic Colors no longer applies. The wisps are treated more like level gimmicks that distract the player from the game's core. Even the game's final level, a stage that should test the player's skill with the game's core mechanics, instead introduces the Green Wisp power-up out of absolutely nowhere. This power-up allows the player to bypass what should be the game's final test, because the game never spent enough time letting the player build up their skills with the core gameplay. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about core gameplay in other games in the series, but it's honestly unclear as to what the core of Sonic Lost World's gameplay really is. When the game begins, it seems like it's the cylindrical level design, but less than half of the main levels even use it, and even the levels that do quickly shift into the other styles. Simply, it's an unfocused mess. Sonic Lost World and Sonic Colors are opposites of each other. Sonic Colors is a game that adds variety that meshes with its core to create a cohesive whole, whereas Sonic Lost World uses variety to do pretty much the opposite, where the alternative playstyles are like separate satellites floating around the core. In moderation, unrelated gameplay styles can be fun, but when it's taken to its extreme, it can fall apart, making the game unfocused and underdeveloped. Of course, Sonic games are not the only ones that have struggled trying to juggle different gameplay styles. I would recommend taking a look at some other series and think about how they incorporate variety. Take a look at games like Sly Cooper, Grand Theft Auto, WarioWare, Metal Gear Solid 5, Nier, and Jak and Daxter. Look at these games and ask yourself this: do the different gameplay styles blend together to make the experience stronger, or do they simply dilute the experience?